we call it informally an Uber for logs. So we connect tree service companies and arborists to sawmills. So if you are an arborist, you can post that to our platform, and then we work with local sawmills so they can claim that load, and then we coordinate logistics and transport.
Hello and welcome to the Conscious Design Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Peterman, and I help turn product ideas into sustainable seven-figure businesses. Join me for another episode where sustainability meets innovation and business savvy. Today, I'm really excited to have Theo Hooker here. He is a co-founder of Cambium, where they are revolutionizing the crossroads of technology and lumber. So hopefully we'll do more. Well, welcome to the show.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. Well, before we get too far into everything, let's start with what got you to decide to tackle this? This is anybody that starts to talk about forestry, lumber, all of that plus technology. That's like two giant worlds combining into one. So what got you to go, yeah, let's co-found something in this space?
I'll give you the two parts to the answer. One is sort of the existential, why focus on this type of problem, and then specifically the Cambium and how that got started. On the larger picture thing, I'm a big believer that we have a lot of tools to address climate change and fight the climate crisis, and there will be new technology, there will be new inventions, but a lot of ground can be made by connecting systems in a different way, utilizing materials in a new way, looking at trash in a different way, and connecting those dots that haven't been connected before. And so my background is really in food and sustainability, but one of my co-founders, Ben, was working at the World Resources Institute, looking at reforestation in the US. We have a lot of land. We can plant a lot of trees. And he zoomed in on urban reforestation, and particularly how the impacts of people and climate. Obviously, during the pandemic, we saw a lot of mental health benefits of trees. People loved, outdoor access, parks, etc.
Nothing like a global experiment.
Right, exactly. Now we have the proof. We didn't know before, but now we're sure. But he kept finding more and more of these examples of this massive amount of wood waste that didn't fit neatly into the traditional lumber industry. And so the fundamental idea was, or the question was, there has to be a way to connect this wasted material into the supply chain that already exists, that already is processing this type of material just from a different source, turn it into a valuable product, and then reinvest those profits and value back into tree planting into those communities. And since then, we kept pulling the thread and finding more and more of these pockets of wasted material. So from wildfire mitigation efforts on the West Coast to hurricane disaster relief on the East Coast and everything in between, there's so much that doesn't fit neatly into the traditional lumber industry. And part of that, our hypothesis was and still is that having technology, having visibility and chain of custody, data and tools to not only identify that material, quickly connect it to the supply chain, to sawmills, to manufacturers, and then enable that view and that data to be accessible by customers was a key linking component to make this material more accessible.
Amazing. As soon as you mentioned supply chain, there's a lot to deal just in that pocket of what you've been talking about. But kind of jumping to one of the first things you talked about is you thinking of, there's a lot of solutions out there. And that one of the things that I lived by basically is I'm convinced 100% we have all the solutions. We just have not put them in the right spot necessarily. It's one of those, I've worked in all kinds of industries, and it's always fascinating to see when you step into a new industry and realize, oh, they've actually solved something. If you could just take that and move it over here, this other industry, it would blow their minds and solve so many problems. And so I love that idea of going, hey, let's actually look at all those things and then reconnect the dots in a different way. So love that kind of thinking process that creates these kind of solutions. So let's get into what exactly material, like we talk about what you're talking about, like waste wood. And a lot of people, there's everything from what you were talking about, even people have spoken about the fact that like when a city trims their trees, there can sometimes, a tree falls down, right? It gets just thrown away or burned at best. At best. Maybe it's most likely just put in with all the other yard debris and nobody gets anything out of it. There's no benefit. What are you creating with? So you have all this very different material, which up until now, most people go, well, that's cool. That's not valuable. What have you been able to do with that to be able to turn that on its head and go, no, it's actually worth something. You should use it.
Yeah, we have the way we talk about our business, because it does span the entire supply chain. So there are a lot of moving parts. The way we break it down is by the products and the services that we offer. Some of those are physical, some of those are digital. So on the physical product side, we really have three core product avenues. One is structural applications for mass timber. So the leading product there is cross-laminated timber, obviously for low, medium, high-rise buildings. Instead of using entirely, or maybe in some capacity, steel and concrete, we can use lumber. That's growing as a movement across the country. Manufacturing is growing in lots of ways. And we just saw a real opportunity to integrate salvaged material into that supply chain, because on a per board basis, the actual grade or character is less important when these panels are pressed and combined together. So that's one product we're really excited about and bringing that to market in bigger ways. The next one is millwork, non-structural components. So interior, flooring, accent walls, ceilings, and then exterior, decking, fencing, siding. We have a handful of products and species there. And then lumber for furniture companies. So if you want to invest in a local or more sustainable material, you want to have local manufacturing, we can help connect that into the supply chain or into your existing supply chain there. So those are our physical products. And again, we work across from sawmills to wood, secondary processors to that manufacturer or end customer or brand company to make that possible. And then part of making that possible is then we go to the digital offerings that we have. So across that supply chain, if you think of it in three stages, getting fallen fiber or wasted material in log form traditionally, getting that to sawmills, that's stage one. Stage two is then turning that log into lumber and to a usable sort of raw material. That's stage two. And then stage three is turning it into a final product and getting it to a customer. So we have a handful of digital tools that plug in at each stage there. So on that front end, we call it informally an Uber for logs. So we connect tree service companies and arborists to sawmills. So if you are an arborist, you connect a lot logs throughout your weekly or monthly jobs to fill a truck. You can post that to our platform, and then we work with local sawmills so they can claim that load, and then we coordinate logistics and transport. So right now we're active in the Northeast, in the Mid-Atlantic. We're starting in the Southeast to deploy that, and then eventually we'll scale into other wood baskets of the country, from Upper Midwest, Pacific Northwest, etc. And then we have internal tools for tracking material. So from chain of custody perspective, from sawmills to wood products companies to end use, we want to be able to show where that material came from, who touched it, and the associated carbon and impact metrics associated with that.
Show people, it is really the same wood we collected. There's no bait and switch. We didn't burn it anyway. And it's new lumber.
Yep. And part of that too is, with an eye towards adoption in a bigger way, we are working with large industrial sawmills who accessing salvaged material, but because the market is relatively new and growing, they're not spending time and energy to separate that fiber out. So you might get, say, 100 logs that go into the system that are from a salvaged source, but they just get mixed in with the 1,000 other logs that they would be getting from their traditional sources.
So they haven't been They just look at it and go, can we use it? Yes, no. Okay.
Exactly.
And rather than saying, oh, 1% is from this, so there's no tracking of that.
Yet. And so that's where we want to not only promote that. So if you're, a company and you have specific grade expectations or something like that, we can offer a blended offering. Basically, we know that, this batch of wood you're getting is going to be 20% salvaged material because of the sawmill that we work with, and we have that tracking. Or we can do the 1-for-1, say this exact board is what you're getting. Obviously, those are different price points and different, levels of engagement in that supply chain that's required, but with an eye towards adoption with these bigger mills and bigger clients, trying to get this tiered approach. So you can start, say it's a 20%, then very similar to FSC or other recycled products. Okay, what do we need to do to get to 50, 60, 70 percentage, of salvaged material? So there's a few avenues there that we are both then combining our physical products with our digital products to enable more access, both on the supply side with sawmills and then obviously the demand side and customers. So that's a little bit of an overview of how we think about getting more material in and pulling more material out.
Hey, it's your host, Ian. I'm really glad you're enjoying this episode. I absolutely love highlighting amazing brands and founders for the awesome things they are doing. I've helped hundreds of entrepreneurs and businesses like yours turn their boldest ideas into powerful, purpose-driven brands. So if you're serious about building a brand people love, like our guests and clients do, and one that you're proud to stand behind, I invite you to dive a bit deeper with our book, Conscious Design. Inside, you'll discover the exact framework and steps we use to help entrepreneurs like you turn purpose into a powerful, impact-driven brand. A brand that stands out, attracts loyal customers, and drives sustainable growth with social and environmental responsibility woven into its DNA. Grab your copy today. You can find it on our website, consciousdesignhouse.com, or just find the link below in the show notes. Enjoy the rest of the episode, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Got it. And then as a company, right, if you're at the consumer level, then you have, if you're doing the tracking, right, you can say with certainty, hey, customer, this chair is made out of either a percentage, it could be something like that, where it's, hey, it's 80% recycled, recovered, however they want to term it.
Right.
Or they could even opt for 100% or whatever that blend is. But then that's something that you can, as a brand, be able to share ultimately, because the end customer is the one that everyone's got to show something to for it to all be worth it. But you're actually able to do that then if you using your guys' technology.
Correct.
I'm curious, how has the rollout, obviously you're growing, how's the rollout been of being Uber for locks? I guess a very interesting, and I know there's a lot of innovation on like the trucking industry in general. Just material transportation is kind of keeps getting turned on its head. I feel like there's a lot of waste and things. So what have you been seeing as you've been going through, and how's that gone in terms of getting people on board of even thinking about things that way? Because it's a totally different process than just throw it back of your truck and then dump it off at the yard waste location.
Yeah, we look at it through a few different lenses. That this is first a group or a few different groups that have not had technology built for them. So arborists go throughout their normal day, and they typically get logs from those, from their jobs. And if likely the easiest solution is to cut it up into small chunks and chip it or take it to a landfill, right?
Yep. Chipper on site.
Right. You got to empty the load and get to the next job. If they're lucky, if they have a truck or a loader that can actually support logs, they might call someone. They might have a guy or a connection who they'll come by and, give them $1,000 for the logs or something like that. But
yeah, like maybe a firewood scenario for sale. Like that's one of the few things I could think of you could value enough.
Right. And part of that is inconsistent in the demand. You don't know if someone's going to want it or not. And also lack of transparency in what you're actually valuing the material as. Maybe 1 month you get $1,000, next month you get $1,600 or something like that. But there's no transparency in what you're getting. And so the main service offering for them is we can give you a consistent and transparent revenue line for what you originally thought of as a liability and a waste from these projects, and making it really easy for you to, take a picture, prep the logs, and get someone to come in and pick it up. So that's really the main value proposition to these arborists, is providing them another revenue stream to their business and making it easy to move that material.
Right. Making it actually worth not chipping it. Basically, you have to be more worthwhile than renting a chipper for 4 hours and chipping it.
Right. And if there's, we're starting to do some customer research on, homeowner had to choose between an arborist that took part in this type of system versus one that didn't. I don't know, we don't have any hard data on this, but I would assume that a lot of homeowners would prefer that, the arborist that contributes to this type of salvaging.
Now it becomes a marketing tool for the arborist to say, hey, we don't just burn everything that we get from your, we actually can go be useful.
Right. And then to the next stage, or I'll jump over the truckers for now, I'll come back, but then to the sawmill. And, the very basic value proposition is we can get you more material. And obviously we have standardized grades, and it's very transparent and easy to coordinate and grade. If you claim a log or a load and it's not graded properly, or you actually get a bunch of, subpar logs that you can't actually use, you can grade that, give that feedback to the arborist. And that's, similar to your, a rating system. You can grade, I was like, I'm 2-star load. And you obviously, as an arborist,
are you able to help? Because I wouldn't, at least most arborists that I know, they're not necessarily grading, right? They're going, hey, here's a tree, chopped it down. Now we're done. Like grade, whereas like when you're talking about the mill, lumber mill, they grade. They're like, oh yeah, here's the grade. We know exactly what it is. We know based on all that. So you're helping to connect those two dots and facilitate that kind of grading system.
Yeah, and it's kind of, imagining, but there's only so much you can know by just looking at the butt end of a log. Once you open it up, you see all the whatever's inside. And so our goal is to make sure the arborist knows the checklist of things that they can do to ensure that they get the highest value for their logs, which is really, is it straight or is it curved? Is it these sort of visual indicators that should translate to a higher price per log there. And we have a whole sort of log prep video course that arborists can take. So, how to organize them, how to prep them, how to cut them, so that it's really easy for a trucker to come and load them and go. And those are all parts of the, process that an arborist could get dinged on or graded on through the process. And then the sawmill, obviously, once they open it up, and they get summarized reports of that load. So we can say, of the logs, of the species, here's actually what we got from that. And we can then cross-reference, okay, this is what we thought, this is what we got. Was it accurate? Was it off? What did we miss? That kind of thing. And so that's where we're getting a lot of data to be able to hopefully make those as close as possible over time.
Eliminate some of the potential errors. Exactly.
And then the last piece, obviously, as you mentioned, there's a lot of variability across trucking, across regions, across types of goods that are being transported. And what we really want to do is build relationships with these small independent trucking companies to just give them another source to be able to transport loads. We actually work with a lot of groups that use us on their backhauls. So they have a shipment set up going in one direction, and then their truckers can just check our platform on their way back to see if they could pick up a load instead of just wasting.
Eliminating some of those empty. Yeah, there's some crazy, I forget the percentages exactly, but I know there's a crazy amount of empty load just drives where it's just, I need the truck here. I got to get it there. Whether something's in it or not, I still need the truck in the bed over there to then transport something. So that's great. So you're able to actually some of these companies are actually able to tap into yours of these additional, maybe we can fill up some of those empty and make it not a waste, not really waste, an inefficient trip. We'll call it that.
Exactly. And that's where, right when you look at this part of the supply chain, you have these three players, the arborists or the folks, salvaging the material, the sawmills who want it, and then the truckers who are getting it from point A to point B. When we think about zooming out, how do we actually make change in the supply chain? Looking and having the demand pull helps this whole system go. So from a very early on at Cambium, advisors, friends, mentors cautioned us that we were doing too much. We were trying to approach, too much of this supply chain. And there's wisdom in that, of course. But now we're at a point where, because we do work across the supply chain, because we can speak the language of all these different players, because we can play with all these leverage points, supply, input, processing, and then demand, can actually get more adoption of our technology, but also of the material itself, which is exciting to see start to actually be a real benefit to us.
Right. I wanted to ask you about, you said arborists and other, but you've also mentioned, forest fire prevention. There's also just after forest fire cleanup. There's so many different ways. Kind of what areas have you found are the most, because I'd imagine there are certain scenarios where maybe the material isn't good enough to be used. So what are the areas that you're seeing that are really good, that have been working for you to actually get quality enough to actually be worthwhile? And are there any that you've tried and then maybe they just not worked out as areas that you can't expand into?
Sure. And do you mean areas in, product or end uses, or like geographic regions or actual species?
Like products, yeah. I'm imagining you could probably operate most of the US at least.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And I think we are doing that actively and across hardwoods and softwoods there. So on the product side, we think of it, where we are now in terms of mass timber, millwork, and furniture. You really asked over the last 4 or 5 years of understanding what the market needs are and what people want versus what's actually possible with salvaged material, the quality, the consistency, etc. We feel really good about these three offerings in terms of, in many ways, we have the SKUs mapped out. We have for the millwork side of things, we have our profiles, we have our dimensions. We don't feel like we need to expand anymore. We've kind of gotten the subset of species that are available and now, and matching that with the demand and what we think will continue to grow. And so now it's just continuing to build the supply chain for scale, integrating technology to make it more seamless, and really pushing forward across those. And just as a tangible example, I think one product particularly for outdoor applications is thermally modified red oak. In the mid-Atlantic and lots of parts of the US, we have a lot of red oak, but it's not really in design, high design these days. People don't go to rust it. It's had its heyday, but now it's really being chipped and wasted or just used as pallets. A lot of pallet manufacturers utilize red oak because it's available there.
Nobody else wants it. So.
Exactly. So through a process called thermal modification, which is just a natural high heat drying process, we can turn red oak that normally does not do well outside into a rot and weather resistant product that is price competitive and performance competitive with your tropical hardwoods, your plastic composites, and certainly your
without doing a chemical. Because I know one of the favorites is just chemical treat the lumber, and that's one way to make anything resistant.
Right. Yeah, we had that thought. Well, no, we don't want to go down that path. But no, just so thermal modification, it's not a new technology or innovation. It was originated in Northern Europe, I think almost 2 decades ago, but has just started to come into the US for the mainstream manufacturing sort of infrastructure. But it is a high heat, low oxygen, no oxygen kiln that basically you bake the material. So you are baking off the starches and sugars that bacteria, fungi, bugs would
all the
traditionally
food.
eat. Exactly. Right. And then you're actually closing the pores to make material more hydrophobic and water resistant. And so we're really excited about, thermally modified red oak. Similarly, we're doing some tests for thermal poplar and other offerings.
So it's not you're at least testing, but you think that you can use it on multiple species of wood. It's not limited to just red oak.
Yep. So
okay.
We have thermal red oak, we have thermal pine. We're starting to do thermal poplar and get that out more and more. Thermally modified soft maple is actually an interesting option because it's something about maple that doesn't make it usable outside.
Okay.
But you get this really rich, almost walnut-looking interior offering.
Interesting. So it changes, because I was imagine if you're baking it, it's going to have some physical look changes. Is that, or does it retain, does it still, like when you put the red oak through, does it still basically look like red oak, or is it,
no,
is it a cosmetic change too? Is it something where like from an architectural interior design standpoint, it could be an interesting material because there is no other way to get that?
You're right. It is also a cosmetic change as well. So like I mentioned, traditional red oak is not really in design trends anymore, a little too red. So after thermal modification, thermal red oak becomes this beautiful chocolate brown color.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And obviously, if you wanted to put an additional sealant or finish on it, it sort of retains that color a little bit longer. But then it would.
Is it still stainable? Like, it takes stain and things like that as easily? Did you know?
Yeah, it would do a finish, just UV protectant or something like that. We do have some options that add some color tones to it. You could go lighter, you could go a little bit darker, but traditionally folks just want like the wood. And it'll gray out in patina, similar to other outdoor wood products over time. And so adding a layer finish can just help preserve that color if that's what you want as well. And so similar pine, poplar, soft maple, there's a cosmetic change that happens that it's usually a darkening of that species.
Okay. Interesting. Usually, I mean, people have been drying lumber for a long time, but not really high heat. So I guess that's the innovation, is using a temperature where it doesn't self-combust, but it is still a lot higher than what you think of as like drying in a lumber yard or something, that before or after processing, right? It's
exactly right.
Something. It's a different temperature than that. Interesting. Well, that's exciting to see, because there's a push. People want more natural, but then they also want it to survive outside, which puts chemical treated at odds, but limiting options. So that's very cool to hear that you guys have this, that this is starting to come around and you're able to use it on multiple species.
And just last point to add on that, I think one of our big goals or responsibilities in this space is to educate and provide a look into how the sausage is made, so to speak. So, and particularly with current offerings, whether pressure treated or chemically treated material or even tropical hardwood, a common question we get is, okay, great, how does this compare to 𝐼𝐴 as an example? We can't argue that 𝐼𝐴 is one of the best, strongest, toughest, most long-lasting natural wood materials out there. It's grown in the rainforest. It's made to be in harsh environments with lots of bugs.
It lives there.
It lives there. You can't argue with that. And it's important to understand the process that is required to make your 100 square foot 𝐼𝐴 deck or your boardwalk made out of 𝐼𝐴. And
it's not cutting pine.
Exactly. And it's not only the land, actual number of trees, the actual acres of material that is required for that, but then obviously the shipping and all the pieces that to get that to where you are. And I think our perspective is, we can't convince you or we can't make you make a decision one way or another, but we want you to have all the information of the actual impact of that product decision.
Well, if you can actually make a comparison, then you can have, I think it's that informed decision. Whereas if you just if all you know is that, then you go, okay, well, yeah, jungle wood, of course it's going to do great. I'll put it outside. It'll be fine.
Right.
But if you don't have that comparison, or if you're going, well, it's either that or pressure washed, which that doesn't look good, or chemical, that's not, like, your options are those, the only things that come to mind, then
right.
if you have the money for it, you're just gonna pick that because there's no other options. So definitely the education, I feel like as people know more, then it's there is actually another option that isn't this ugly stuff that nobody wants or super expensive. Amazing. I'm curious, as far as the material that you're able to intake, right? You obviously have to grade. You can't just, I can't hand you a stick from the ground that's like this thick. It's not going to be what you're looking for. So kind of what is the range of raw material input that you can actually use? Obviously, it doesn't have to be a giant oak tree, but what kind of parameters have you found actually gets you that raw material that a lumber mill will actually buy, that you can actually use? What does that look like?
Very technically, with the Uber for Logs platform, which is called Mill Market, I forgot to mention that earlier.
Important.
There's very clear size constraints or every minimums that we have to hit. So it's really, you're looking at 16 to 18 inches minimum DBH diameter at breast height to make that worth anyone's while on the sawmill side of things. And then you need at least 8 feet, 6 inches long from, and if you look at a tree standing, you can kind of imagine from the stump or where you would cut the stump, which is as close to the ground as possible, to just beneath the first branch. When branches start to come in, that's where you see knotting and just variation in material. That
Quality for use. Yeah, exactly. Knots are not fun.
Right. And so that's the basic, size parameters from a intake perspective. And then obviously, when we're thinking about biomass and the whole tree mentality is obviously the trunk is just one part. You have the crown, you have the branches, you have all this other. And so a lot of our focus is on the log because that has the potential to be the highest value recycled or salvaged part of it. We're starting to do more work on the biomass side of things.
Okay.
So what can we do with all that? The branches, the leaves, the everything else that we have obviously so much more volume of compared to the log that comes from a single tree. So we're working on that. And then you asked earlier about the product offerings or the array of products. And we really think that across mass timber, millwork, furniture, within that, we can span a pretty big array of grades to meet those product expectations. And we try to map those as much to existing grading certifications as possible. So if it's hardwood, working with the NHLA, the National Hardwood Lumber Association, or on the softwoods, the National Softwood Association board, to see, what are we talking about and how does that map to, on the hardwood side, your FAS and select grades to number 1 common to number 2 common. And pretty much we can match a lot of material to that. And then obviously that helps with right sizing pricing, with right sizing volume and expectations across the board. So really what we're trying to do, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. A lot of this has been figured out. So it's more of a mapping exercise.
Right. You're going, here's the wheel. How do we line it up so that we're not playing over here where nobody actually has a supply? You're really just going, okay, well, what can we get that somebody's was going to throw away? And then where can it plug in? What are the channels? If this company wants grades X through Y, cool. Make sure those are getting in a truck and going to them. And then how do you just, again, connecting the dots, but not reinventing the dots?
Right. One that's, you said it exactly. It's going back to the point I made at the beginning is just putting in the effort that has not been done to map this sort of underutilized, undressed material to the existing system and make that as easy as possible. And so that's really how we think about, whether it's grading, material input, just getting to the system, and then work with big groups like FSC, SFI, who are setting these certifications and the standards for sustainable forest management and things like that. Salvaged material is a very new concept in relation to those grades. And so working with them, again, we don't want to be a new certification body. It's a whole kettle of fish we don't want to mess with.
That's a whole other layer above everything.
We just want to make sure that the data that we're collecting across the supply chain, the standards we're setting with arborists, sawmills, et cetera, can map to these existing systems.
Right. A is A, not something else. It's still, if you need A, you get A. And that's no confusion. Amazing. Well, I love that. I think it's really important. People come up with, there's a lot of innovation. And anytime you can do something where you don't have to have this massive leap in behavior of everyone, that's where you get the fastest and the highest acceptance rate. So I love what you guys are doing. You're thinking about this so that, hey, how do we make it arborists or whoever's chopping the tree down? How do we make it easy for them to go, yeah, this is good. Here you go. Here's the logs. Take it away. Connecting everything so that you're not everyone's changing their behavior a little bit, which effectively you're making a pretty big change when you stack up all their behavior changes together, but you're not loading one person up and going, all right, you have to change. You have to do a 180 here. And then nobody else does anything else. You're taking it all on yourself. You're letting it be this spread out increment. It feels like incremental, but adds up. I feel like it adds up pretty quickly by the time you're done with the system. So I know changing whole system is big and challenging, as all your advisors have talked about. But I feel like when you can execute it well, it's actually less pressure. I feel like there's a lot of less pressure that happens when you do it that way, even though it is big and scary when you
that's where we see, to your point, we have the solution. I think that's where, when those things start to come together, that's when we see the real impact across the system.
Right. Well, I love it. And this has been a pleasure. I love talking about what you guys are doing. Before we wrap up, I wanted to make sure, and I know you shared the app name, but if there's any other things that people should be aware of, and then also what's the best way to reach out to you, connect with you. If municipalities, I've talked to some people about, the city has their own contractors that take out trees and redo, that's a whole supply chain for you guys. Anybody what's the best way to reach out to you guys, connect, potentially partner?
Yeah, I would say the fail-safe, cambiumcarbon.com. We have a contact form. Shoot us a note there. Let us know who you are and what you're interested in. That's the easy one. But breaking it down a little bit, because we do have a lot going on. If you are on the salvage side, so arborist, tree service company, trucker, mill market is where to go. So it's just millmarket.net. There's contact forms and you'll be directed to the right folks there. If you are in the wood products world, in the manufacturing side, whether it's a sawmill or a wood products company, or on the demand side of architect, designer, using wood in some way and want to learn more, head over to carbonsmartwood.com. That gives an overview of our materials, our offerings, and obviously there's a contact form as well. You can reach me. My email is just Theo, T-H-E-O, at cambiumcarbon.com. Happy to chat. And yeah, we look forward to hearing from anyone.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for taking your time to talk, and I'm looking forward to see what else you guys do and the impact you can make.
Amazing. Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
And that wraps up another episode of the Conscious Design Podcast. If today's episode inspired you to bring your product idea to life and turn it into a sustainable 7-figure business, visit petermanfirm.com or click the link below. Your ideas have the power to change the world, and we're here to help make that happen. Thank you for joining us, and I'll see you on the next episode.